Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to our virtual workshop on printmaking for queer social justice, hosted by the GLBT Historical Society. My name is Nalini Elias. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Museum Experience at the Society, and I'm just here to introduce today's event and instructor. First, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that the GLBT Historical Society is based on Ohlone tribal land. And so I invite any Indigenous folks with us today to make themselves visible in the chat and be recognized as we honor the contemporary and ancestral lives of America's Indigenous people. Also, I want to thank Lee Pfeffer, the Society's manager of Museum Experience, for putting together this event. Today's event will be recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel and our website for later viewing. And we also welcome your active participation in the chat. You can post comments, discussions, and you can ask questions as well. So a little bit about us. The Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender GLBT Historical Society was founded in 1985, and it is recognized internationally as a leader in the field of LGBTQ public history. Our mission is to collect, preserve, exhibit, and make accessible to the public materials and knowledge to support and promote understanding of LGBTQ history, culture, and arts in all their diversity. Our operations are centered around two sites: the GLBT Historical Society Museum, located in the heart of San Francisco's Castro neighborhood since 2011, and the Dr. John P. DeCecco Archives and Research Center in the Mid-Market District. Both locations are currently closed due to the pandemic, so please check out our growing array of exhibitions, events, and archival resources on glbthistory.org. Finally, I want to thank all our members and donors who make our work possible. And let's see, so now on to tonight's event, Printmaking for Queer Social Justice. It gives me so much happiness to introduce tonight's instructor and master printmaker, Gabriela Martinez. Her pronouns are she, her. She's a Long Beach, California-based artist, printmaker, educator, and independent curator. From 2006 to 2007, she apprenticed with Mexican artist Artemio Rodriguez at La Mano Press in Los Angeles, California. And since then, she has curated various exhibitions of emerging and established printmakers from the US and Latin America, including Gráfica América in 2019. She currently serves as Director of Education at the Museum of Latin American Art in Long Beach, California. And with that, I will turn it over to her and Lee, and just have fun, everyone. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you, Nalini. And I had the pleasure of working with Nalini for a few years at MOLA. So I have a relationship with her. She's really fantastic. And so when she put me in touch with Lee in order to organize this workshop, I was more than happy to do so. So I guess I'll start out by asking, how many of you have your block or your plate already prepared, where you have your design ready?
And what I've gone ahead and done is just taken away everybody's video, but if you want to contribute and say something, or if Gabriela has a question for you, you're welcome to put yourself back up on the screen or just put yourself on video, or you can talk in the chat, whatever is your comfort level. You know, and also if you don't want to show up on video for this to be recorded, but you have a question, you can let me know and I can answer. I can ask it as well. But we're doing a kind of closed meeting for right now, and then it will go out to our constituents afterwards.
Okay, and please feel free to participate. I have the chat box open. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it as much as possible, although actually I can pull it up since all the other videos are hidden. So I'll have the chat box open right here so I can read what you write. And please feel free to pop in with your audio or your video whenever you have a question, or if you'd like to make a comment or a statement. I'm more than happy to answer questions throughout and also interact with you. And if there are any steps that you're not clear on, please let me know. So I think you can do maybe a thumbs up sign if you need something, and then we can go through there. And this is actually my first time. So I've coordinated a lot of these virtual workshops, but it's actually my first time teaching one. So I'm on the other side of the laptop today. Okay, so I see that I think the majority of you haven't prepared your plate, which is totally fine. You can do this while I am teaching the workshop. So I have 2 plates that I prepared, and I don't know how clearly you can see them. I'll hold them up over here. So I have a horizontal sort of a landscape design, and then I have a portrait one that I did also. And they're both based on the same images, actually, the same image that I took, a design, a photograph that I saw of 2 figures in a book called Vanguards from an exhibition about the Black Panther Party. That I happen to have in my library. And then for both, I just used the slogan, no justice, no peace. So that was the slogan that I decided upon and the design. So I created 2 just so you can see it. And I created one using black line printmaking or relief and one using white line. And I'm gonna show you the difference right now. So you might be familiar with the black line style of printmaking, which is where all of the raised areas are what are inked up, and you want to make the raised areas kind of like the outlines. So if you can see on this one, maybe if I hold it here also, the outline sort of the ribbon, the text, everything is in black line. So it's not in the white line, and all the negative space. So the areas that are around the figures and around the different elements are white, right? So there's black line printmaking, and then, and then there's white line. So this little chapbook, this is not by me, this is actually by an artist friend in Buenos Aires called Estampa Feminista, which is feminist printmaking, a collective. And so she made this little book. Actually, this was done in collaboration with a writer. And so the artist used white line on this one, in which then the negative space, right, is all in black, and then your highlights are in white. So you have the option of doing either black line or white line. So the nice thing about white line is it's the easiest because you don't have to then remove as much of the block. So with relief printmaking with linoleum and woodcut, you're literally chipping away and taking away the block. We can't do that with foam. So what we do with the foam is that we press into it and we leave some of it sort of in relief. So the reason that we decided to go with the foam instead of a linoleum or a wood block was cost, because you wouldn't need to buy all of the tools that are associated with relief printmaking if you're doing linoleum or wood. And also because it's just a little easier to work with and you can't cut yourself. So this is what we use at the Museum of Latin American Art when we do printmaking projects, and we do them pretty regularly actually. So in the video that was sent out, we also discussed how the image is going to be reversed. So when you design it, you want everything to be backwards. So for example, in here in the text, it says no justice, no peace. And then I gave you the advice of doing it in capital letters because it's easier to control it. And the hardest thing to try and write out is actually cursive. So I have my 2 plates here. The other thing that we talked about in the intro video was the creation of your registration plates, which is going to make it a lot easier for you to print. And that's also in the syllabus. And so what this does is basically it gives you a spot where to put your block or your plate, and then also a spot where to put your paper. So I made 2 different ones. Again, this one is for the landscape. So it has, you know, the top up here. This one is for the portrait one. So it's marked out here, so I'm not going to get confused which one that I want. And then also tear down your paper ahead of time as well. Okay, so you're working on your block. I can actually start sort of the printing process, which sometimes can be a little bit complicated. And I can also talk about sort of like the history of printmaking and how it came about and why. My own area of expertise is printmaking in the Americas. So kind of like tracing the history of printmaking, particularly in Latin America. Fun fact, the first printing press in all of the Americas was actually in Mexico City. And the second printing press was actually in Lima, Peru. And that happens to be where my parents are from. So my dad is from Mexico. He's actually from Pachuca, Hidalgo, Mexico. My mom is from Lima, Peru. And those are the two places where Mexico and Peru are the two places where we find the first printing presses of the Americas. And they were established, obviously, in order to coerce and to dominate the indigenous populations that were already here. So basically they were used in order to spread political ideas, in order to print pamphlets and books sharing religious beliefs, so in order to convert everybody to Catholicism. And so some of the first books that were printed were actually like catechisms that were printed in indigenous languages so that priests could have them in order to convert indigenous communities. So it was originally a tool of oppression. And then as a sort of independence movements came about and political revolutions, printmaking was then used as a tool for liberation. So I think that's really fantastic. And now printmaking is recognized as one of the most democratic forms of print and art because you can make multiple copies that you can distribute to as many people as possible. Once you have the tools that you need, it's actually not as expensive to make prints as it is to make other types of art forms. And also because it's a collective form of art making, printmakers usually gather in print studios and workshops where they're able to pool their resources in order to have access to printing presses. And this is funny. So I went to grad school for printmaking, and printmakers always have a nice camaraderie because we have to share everything. And we were always comparing our experiences with the painting and drawing students who had a little more competition going on between them because they work a little more independently. So I think that's really interesting. So I'm gonna start then. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a test print, and then we'll see if there's anything that we want to fix for it. But I don't know if you can see the design well with this, but here is what the plate looks like. And so you can see I've really gone in there. I used my little Stylus set that I have that I actually got for making decorative cards out of some random paper that I used to like when I was a kid. I don't know if you ever saw it, like they would make like quinceañera invitations and wedding invitations, and they'd use this like sort of like, not wax paper, but this like vellum almost. And you use these little styluses in order to make designs. So I've been using them actually to help me with my own art practice, and particularly when we use these foam prints. So I use different types of styluses to make this. And the nice thing about using these is that it looks like I'm gonna have a lot of really nice chatter in my print. So chatter being kind of like the little like noise that you see. So you see this is a pretty clean print, and that the white and the black sections are pretty delineated, but every once in a while you'll just see like a little bit of texture that comes through. So that's known as chatter because it's kind of going on in the background, and it's not, it adds a little bit of, I guess, like depth to what you're doing, but it's not super distracting in that it dominates the image. So it looks like we're gonna have a lot of chatter with this one, which I am excited about. So we're gonna pull out the ink, and I think I'm gonna use red because I really like red. And it's sort of like a color that I associate also with revolution and with sort of political content as well. A lot of like red, black, and white, for example, in political posters. And I'm gonna do an experiment. I'm gonna put my microphone over here, and I'm gonna see if you are able to hear the sound of the swish swish of the ink as I roll it out. So you let me know if you can hear it. So if you can hear it, maybe do a thumbs up. I'm rolling it out, and actually a good way with printmaking, you really have to use all of your senses. So the ink itself has to have this surface that it looks like kind of like a tangerine skin and not like super bumpy, sort of like citrus fruit. So, you know, sometimes you get like a lemon or something and it has a really bumpy surface. That's not what you want. You want like a really sort of, you want like kind of like a textured surface, but you want it to be really, really small bits of texture. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll up my plate. So I'm actually going to put this here so that you can see it and so that I don't mess up my registration plate. So I'm going to use one of these sheets that I'm going to use to print with. So very carefully now you're going to roll it up. You can see kind of the design beginning to emerge, right? And I'm getting some of that really lovely chatter. So I decided for my black line version of this image that I was going to try and go with more of like a screen printing poster aesthetic. So every printmaking process, right, has a very different look and feel. And so with screen printing, because it is it's a stencil type of process where you just have big flat spaces that you're filling in with ink. You're using a squeegee to kind of push that through. And you have a very specific aesthetic. So this is going to be kind of like a combination of that with the big flat areas and relief printmaking, which is where you get all that really nice chatter. So I'm using, actually, because I misplaced my water-based ink, I am using oil-based ink, but I do have less toxic citrus thinner that I'm going to use to clean it up. But if you're using your water-based ink, then you shouldn't have any problems. You should just be able to clean it up really easily with soap and water. You want to do it in layers. You don't want to put in too much because if you start with too much ink from the get-go on the surface, you might run into your plate filling in really delicate areas where you don't want it to. That's why we do it just a little bit at a time. So it requires patience. And you'll start to see on the plate also, it's starting to get that sort of like texture-y thing as well, that texture-y sort of look too. So you can see how everything that is raised basically is now red. And then everything that is recessed into the plate itself is going to show up as white, because I'm using a white sheet of paper to print on. Now I'm going to put that there. So I put it on my registration plate that I've marked. So it says top. So I always know which way is up. And then I've marked it with paper right here. So I know which is my guiding line for paper. And now, this is just construction paper that I'm using right now. I already had it pre-cut for another project that I was working on at work. And so I just decided to use it for this project because it was the perfect size that we had here. So then you want to just like drop it. So you want to line it up and drop it, but you want to make sure that your block doesn't move, okay? Now, in order to transfer it, we're going to use some pressure. And you can use, I forgot to bring my wooden spoon, but you can use a wooden spoon and then just kind of rub it. You can also use your fingertips or just like the heel of your hand, Or if you have access to a brayer, you can use that as well. And this is a really nice, a really lovely Japanese brayer that actually I was gifted with when I started graduate school by a really lovely friend. And I've kept it ever since. Very nice. So this is plastic, right? I also have a bamboo one that sits on a disc as well. But you can just use a wooden spoon if you want to. Okay. I don't know if you can see the image is starting to come through. If you want to take a risk, if you want to kind of be risky and check it, you can. And then I think I want to add a little bit more pressure. So you need a nice flat surface because you don't want it to get in the cracks there. You want it to really just lift everything that is on the surface. I like to do a little more pressure like along the edges also. Like visually, I just like the way kind of like a little frame looks around it, but that's a personal choice. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. So there is the final product. So you can see the two figures with their arms raised in the air. And then you can see the text here that says no justice, no peace. So this is like the more challenging way of doing it because you are trying to ensure that the negative space around the figures and around the text is flat enough or recessed enough, but you don't want to break through the foam. And because it's so thin, you kind of always run the risk of if you push too hard with the stylus or with a dull pencil or pen that you're using, that you might actually break through the foam. So here's a little poster or flyer. And the nice thing about printmaking is that if I really like the image, I can make multiple of these and I can give some away. I can have some available for purchase. And because it's inexpensive, I can experiment with it and I can kind of place it wherever I want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to print the white line block. So again, remember that's where I have recessed the outline and kept the negative space, and the majority of sort of like the imagery around the figures too is going to be in black or red. So this is going to be mostly in red with just a little bit of white highlights. And so what we want with this one is not to get the ink in there. And if anyone has any questions, or if you're working on your plate and you want some advice as to what you're doing, or you have a design and you want me to like, let you know if you're going in a direction that's going to be easy for you to print from. A lot of my work as an instructor is also kind of like walking around and troubleshooting and saying you're making your life way too complicated for yourself. Let's switch up this design so that you can have an easier time of it. So now I'm going to ink this one up. Oh, that's a nice sound. I'm going to put the microphone near there so you can hear it. So as you're rolling up, you want to go also in various directions. You don't always want to go in the same direction, just to ensure that your ink gets everywhere. And also because if you aren't necessarily taking the best care of your roller, it can get little dents in it. So really you're supposed to store roller side up or hanging, because you don't want to damage the surface of the roller. So if you leave it face down, it's rubber, so it will flatten. And unfortunately, my rollers have been sitting in a toolbox, crammed in with other things. So they've got a few little flat areas. So luckily, they're not super expensive, but if I ever invested in a really nice, expensive roller, I would want to make sure that I had the proper space to store it so that I don't damage my tools. And one of the questions that often comes up is ink the same as paint? Which the answer is no. They're made up of the same different elements. So you have a pigment, which is what gives it the color. You have a binder, which is what holds it together. And then you have a vehicle, which ensures that it can then spread from one area to the other. But the difference between paint and ink is that ink is a lot tackier. So it's created with a different consistency. Now that said, if you don't have ink and you want to use paint, you can use it, but you want to let it kind of get a little bit tackier. You want to be really, really careful because you run the risk of just like slipping and sliding all over your plate. So, I mean, I've done these workshops with kids where we've used tempera paint, and I've taught it to teachers who only had tempera paint in their classroom. And then I just have to let them know that they don't want super watery. You want really tacky tempera paint in order to work with it. So it's a totally different thing. But that said, if you told me like, oh, you know, I want this color paint, I would know that you were referring to ink. Okay. This is funny. I've never taught a class sitting down before. I'm usually like on my feet and running around all over the place. So this is a very interesting situation for me as well. Okay, so this is the portrait or the vertical one. As you can see, we're gonna put that down there. I'm gonna grab another sheet of paper. So I think in the syllabus, I discussed maybe like the better types of paper to use. If you want to use printer paper, you can, but don't use a super slick kind, because again, you're gonna slip and slide all over your plate and you're just gonna smear your image all over it. So you want something with what we call tooth, which means there's some like texture or fuzziness to it. And then if you're using things like mulberry paper as well, sometimes one side is a little fuzzier, or cotton rag, sometimes one side's a little fuzzier than the other side. And you always want to use a side that has tooth or that is fuzzier, because that is going to absorb the ink a little bit better as well. So I think this is lined up pretty good. Ooh, this might be a little bit off because I'm sitting. I'm not used to sitting. Okay. So now we're gonna do this one. My neighbors have a pandemic puppy, and he's super cute. But since everybody's been at home, he's gotten used to everybody being around. And so sometimes when they leave the house, he gets really sad and he howls. So if you hear howling, that is Koji, my next door neighbor. Very sweet, huge now, gigantic dog. Okay. I'm gonna check on it real quick. That's looking pretty good. It's a little too textured, a little more textured than I want it, but. Okay. And then you can tell it's like a little bit crooked. So I'm gonna peel it off for the reveal. Oh, no, it's fine. I'm gonna peel it off. And there we go. So now this is the white line. So I know sometimes it takes the camera a little bit to focus. Oh, Ari just joined. Hi, Ari. No problem. I'm doing the printing demo. And then I think afterwards I can answer some questions and maybe help anyone who is printing along or who wants some advice on design, or we can chat. So those are the two different ones. And I'll hold them up to here too. So we have the black line where the majority of the negative space is white and the subjects and the text is in the red, but it's called black line because traditionally you use black ink. And then we have the white line here. And this is usually the easiest way to go if you're starting out. And then, I don't know if I'm gonna do this or not. What I can do is I can go into it and alter it slightly as well. I can add more highlights. So this would be your text, your test prints that you have, right? And if you wanted to, you can always go in and adjust. So the nice thing about relief printmaking is that you can usually go into the block a little bit later, and you can always take away more, but you can never add more. So once the inked areas are recessed, they're recessed. You can't make them pop up. And if you're working with linoleum cut or wood, you can't really, you can try to glue the piece back in, but it's gonna be really, really, really hard. And I've done that before. And one time I was working on a print and it had like 40 figures in it. And it's like a melange of humans. It was like a protest scene actually. And I was carving and carving and carving and carving and I wasn't paying attention. And then I looked and I had seriously just cut out one of the figures' buttocks, like their butt. I just like carved it out. And I was just like, oh no, what am I gonna do now? I'm so far into this piece. There's so many characters. And I tried to like, can I glue it in? I couldn't glue it in. So what I really had to do is I had to redesign everything and come up. I still had a little like surface to work with. And I had to just kind of like redesign the composition so it didn't look like, I think like I put something in front of that figure in order so that you couldn't see that I had like literally just like carved a part of their bodies out, which is bad. So I can go in if I want with this. So usually if you were using water-based ink, which you should be using, you can literally just go in with like a wet rag and wash it off. I don't have that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just try and press out as much as I can from this just to get any excess ink out. You'll also notice that I'm wearing an apron because I tend to be one of those people when I cook too that I just like wipe. So I generally always wear an apron when I print. And if it has pockets, even better, because then I can keep tools or a cell phone or anything that I need. So as I'm doing this, I'm gonna kind of pause for a second. If anyone has any questions, or if you want to share your design and talk about why you chose that.
Looks like we've got a question from Ramon about whether or not you have a preference for either linoleum, wood, or foam in your own printmaking.
Oh, in my own personal printmaking, I generally use more linoleum, although I have to say the most rewarding is wood, because as I like to say, you are in relief printmaking, you are literally collaborating with material constantly. And wood has knot holes and it has texture and it has splinters. And so in a way you're like kind of battling the wood constantly. but also letting it help you create your design as well. Because if you have like a knot hole, you kind of just have to figure out how you're going to work around it, right? Or if it's splinters, if you're using really rough wood, then you have to figure out how you're going to incorporate that texture or the wood grain into your work. But it does take a lot longer than using linoleum. And when I use linoleum, I prefer the hard and thin linoleum. So I actually seek out flooring linoleum, like not with textures or designs or anything, but like the plain flooring linoleum that you might see in some older kitchens. And actually, when I moved into this place, this is a duplex, and the couple that owns it lives in the back house. And they found they actually floored their kitchen with flooring linoleum, and they gave me the extra scraps. And it's lovely because the thinner and the harder it is, the nicer lines and edges that you get. So some people like working with softer linoleum or with easy cut. And for beginners, that's totally what you should be working with, because you're not gonna carve too hard and then accidentally stab yourself. So it's a lot easier for beginners. And then for teaching, and especially working with little kids, I like using the foam. I actually like it better than using easy cut. Easy cut, sometimes with little kids, it can get a little frustrating for them, because even though it does kind of cut like butter, it also just kind of crumbles sometimes. And then they get frustrated. So I find like foam's a lot easier. So I've just created, in cleaning my plate, what one would call a ghost print. So it is the ghost of the image right there. So you can see it's a little bit lighter. And so if you have a ghost print, sometimes what you can do, if you don't want to throw it away, if you find it to be wasteful, what you can do is that you can let it dry, and then you can go in actually with any other type of medium and alter it or use it for collaging as well. So sometimes we do that.
If you were to, on a ghost print, if you were to like go over it with, say, like watercolors to try to make color in the lines, would that stick on the rest of the ink, or would it kind of slough off? Like, I'm thinking kind of like, you know, in elementary school when we used to do like the crayon drawings, and then you'd go over that in watercolor and it would come off with the crayon.
Yeah, so if you're using water-based ink, there is the possibility, depending on the kind of water-based ink that you're using, some of it, once it dries, it actually stays pretty well onto the paper, but some of it will be diluted with water. So it kind of depends on the type of ink that you're using. But if you think about it that way, if you look at it with like the ghost print, I already know I have this red ink on here, and if it dilutes really easily, you know, how can I blend it? If you're using oil-based ink, water and oil don't mix. So the oil-based ink won't absorb the watercolor. It actually will push it away. So I'm gonna tear a little piece of paper. I have to say, the greatest skill that I learned as a printmaker was tearing paper. I'm like amazing at tearing paper. I can give you a nice clean edge even without using a ruler or a tear bar. All right, so I think it's pretty clean. Yeah, I might get a little bit on my hand, but I'm not super worried about it. I can clean that later. So what I'm gonna do now is, I've seen this and I'm like, this is really cool. I like it, I could work with this. But you know what I just realized? I made a mistake. I did that line in that J there because when I'm doing the letters, I try to work in shapes, right? Break everything down into simple shapes. So when I did the J, I was like, oh, I'm gonna use this rectangle for the top, and then I'm gonna add everything else. Well, when I was tracing it, I didn't realize I just went across like as a habit and just did that. So now you have that weird line, and I'm like, I don't really like that. Let's fix it. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna use my trusty stylus here, And I'm gonna go in and see if I can get that. And another nice thing is like paper. So I don't wanna get my fingers dirty. So I'm just gonna put a little piece of paper there so I can hold it down and not get too much ink on my fingers. Actually, this one a little bit better. So again, going with the stylus, and I'm just making all the letters really recessed and pressing into them. And we'll see if we get a little bit of chatter with that. I personally don't mind a little bit of chatter, and that again is a personal aesthetic decision. I used to work with a printmaker who really hated chatter. And so they would always work really hard at trying to get rid of any sort of excess marks in the background. But I feel like there's a time and place for it. I also have like a few prints where I've seen it and I've realized that some of the chatter is really distracting after I've already printed a few. And then I have to go in. Okay, so we have a question. How am I correcting it? So I'm just going in and reworking what you call reworking the plate. So with this white line design that I did, I left the interior, as you can see, of the letters raised. So when I inked it up, you just see the white outline around the red letters. But what I want to do is, because I noticed that my J is a little messed up and you have that extra line, I'm going to go in and just press into the letters so that the letters are white when I print it. Go for it. Win. Let's see what you got.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Win. I use he, him pronouns. So my design, I chose this drawing that Margaret Kilgallen did. I didn't put any words on it because I just was trying something simple, but when printing it, I didn't really think about all the ink. So I'm wondering, is there another way to apply the ink without, like, aside from the roller? Because I don't mind the chatter and I like the like sort of lighter ink look behind, but you can obviously see where I like rolled the ink. So can you use like a brush or something, or is there any other way to apply the ink a little bit more accurately?
You can, and you can even make a stencil to put around it. And I've done this before as well, where if I don't want the chatter, I'll literally just lay down blue tape over those areas, or I'll create a stencil that is shaped around it. And that way I put that over it before I ink it up, and then I ink it up. And the thing is, you just have to reapply it. So if this is a print that like you really want to print over and over and over again, I would suggest maybe taking like a piece of thin plastic if you have it, you know, and using that as your stencil. But otherwise you can just use a piece of paper, any kind of scrap paper that you want, and create the stencil around it and then ink it up.
Cool. Yeah, I have a piece of cellophane, so I'll try that.
Perfect.
Cool, thanks.
That was really, I like your design. It's really nice.
Thank you.
And then also another thing that you know can be done if you just find it really frustrating and you want it to be really super clean. With foam, the nice thing is you can actually cut it out too. So you can actually make a shaped plate with foam. So for example, like let's say I wanted to have like scalloped edges to this or something, I can just go in with scissors and literally cut it because it's foam. You can't do the same with a piece of wood or linoleum, but you can do that with the foam, which is why it's really nice.
If you're doing printing on like a piece of linoleum or wood, are you using the same techniques to recess things, or would you have to like actually carve?
Yeah.
And how would that be different if you're, you know, doing it all through kind of tracing?
Yeah, you'd use a literal knife for it, actually. I can show you. Hold on just a second. Okay, so I had my tools actually next to me because I keep all my printmaking stuff. So yeah, so for linoleum, you would use this type of cutter is one of them that you can use. This is like a student grade one, but they're actually quite nice. They have nicer, more professional ones that you can use, but I really like these. And the way that this works is it actually has like blades that you can remove, and they're different size blades as well. So I tend to use the smallest sort of V blade and the largest U blade, and that's pretty much it. And I feel like that gives me a nice variety of line. Here's like more like a wood carving tool as well. So they're literally knives. And the fun thing is I used to teach high school art. I taught at the LA County High School for the Arts when I was wrapping up my MFA, and then I actually taught there when I first started my museum career because museums don't pay very well. So if you're entry level, you have multiple jobs, right? So I was working at the museum and I was also teaching high school art. And it was funny because the principal was really scared of printmaking because you're working with knives. And you don't always want teenagers to have knives, right? And so the principal kind of really scared me and was like, you know, if anybody cuts themselves, you're not allowed to use linoleum or wood anymore. And you're gonna have to just like use easy cut, which is fine. But I felt like for a year-long class for an art school where kids were literally getting ready like to go to college, you know, and maybe pursue a career in printmaking, that it was really important that they did it. So whenever I introduced the project, I was always very clear that like, please be very careful. You always cut away from yourself. You never cut towards yourself, right? So you always cut away. So you always are holding the block and you cut away, 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 never towards you because these are knives and they're sharp. And I said, if anyone cuts themselves and the principal hears about it, we'll get our tools taken away, you know, just being very clear and honest about it. And in the years that I worked there, we had like a couple of cuts, but the funny thing is that I was walking around the classroom one time and this really hardworking and usually like a very prolific young woman in my class who was always just like constantly working was paused and wasn't really doing it. It was really not like this student. Like they were always on it and always working and always super excited to be making art, right? Like they hardly ever had a day where they just were not working. And so I approached her and I was like, hey, what's wrong? You know, you seem to be not really working on this project. Are you stumped? Is there anything I can help you with? Can you brainstorm? And she was sitting kind of like this. And then she very like shyly pulls out her hand and she's like, I cut myself. And I was like, oh no, like you need to take care of that, like get it cleaned up, whatever. And she said, but I don't want to go to the nurse's office because then the principal will find out and she'll take away all our tools and we won't be able to do it. And I felt really bad, poor thing. She was really worried about it. So it was fine. She ended up going to the office and it wasn't a big deal. But I thought that was really sweet. She was just like, I don't want to ruin the class for the rest of my colleagues. So I would just sit here silently suffering. But it wasn't a super bad cut. Okay, so I'm almost done doing that. So I'm reworking the plate. It's a process. And I did get a tiny bit of ink on my fingers, but it's not too bad.
Looks like Nalini asked, how often do you have to replace your stylus?
Oh, the styluses, I've had these forever. Oh, the blades though, when I'm doing printmaking, maybe every few years, I have to change it out, the tips of the blades. The thing is though, once you find a really good blade, because every blade really does cut differently. I mean, I know they're all, you know, mass produced and they're just like commercial blades or whatever. But when you find a blade that you like, it becomes your favorite blade because you know what kind of a line that's gonna make. And so you're always wanting to work with that one. So I do have, if this is on here, if it's on the tool, it's because it's my favorite blade. So, and I'm really bad about changing my blades out too. So I just keep multiple ones. So here you can see the 2 blades that are my favorite. So here's the wide U blade, and then here is the small V blade, and they create different types of lines as well. Okay, so I've done that. I'm gonna roll this out again. Art is very wasteful. Art museums are very wasteful as well. I went to a conference one time and one of the topics was actually, how can we make museums more sustainable? And nobody really had an answer to that, unfortunately. Okay. Let's see, so. More fun sound. And if you find yourself working with the water-based inks, they will dry out at some point. So you kind of have to keep refreshing them. And I do just like directly from the tube, a little smear of ink, and then I roll it out. I do have a palette knife. I don't really use it that often when I'm doing printmaking unless I'm working from a jar. So some ink comes from a jar, and then I'll use a palette knife for that. And you can just use a spoon.
Would screen printing ink also work for doing this kind of printing, or?
No, that's a totally different thing too. Yeah, all of the inks are so specialized. Yeah, I would say your best bet is tempera if you don't have water-based ink at home. Acrylic dries too quickly, you'll clog up your tools and ruin them.
And can you do block printing on like a shirt or something, or you should?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
you can use this kind of ink for that?
For that, you would want to use, I mean, you could, but it'll wash out. Eventually it'll fade. So they have specific type of fabric type that you can use as well.
Okay.
You can use oil-based inks for block printing on fabric. And you just have to like really let it dry, and then you have to kind of like heat treat it. The only thing with block printing, I knew artists who do it, and they have to kind of build their own contraption. So, you know, like when you're doing screen printing on t-shirts and you'll see like, they'll have like, it looks like an octopus almost.
Yeah.
And there's like a silhouette, and then they're like pulling because everything has to be flat. You're just gonna have to sort out how you can print onto the fabric, because paper, it's so tightly woven and it's really flat, but with fabric, it's stretchy and it's a little more absorbent. And so you're just gonna have to like troubleshoot until you find the best way to do it. But yeah, there are a ton of artists who actually print blocks on t-shirts. One is actually an artist in Chicago who is from Nicaragua named Carlos Barberena. And he runs the, what is the name of the collective he runs? So he's Bandolero Press, but he runs a collective out of printmakers out in Chicago. And I can't recall the name right now, but can try and find it later. And he does a lot of printing on t-shirts, and he'll do like demos on it as well. And he actually runs a printmaking festival every summer. And this year they did it all virtually, which I thought was really impressive. I mean, we're all doing everything virtually now, but an entire printmaking like festival, I was impressed. And his work is super political also. So he does a lot with, for example, a lot of like youth that is killed through police violence or through the military in Central America, focusing a lot on the mothers as well of those who are killed through state violence. He does a lot of like anti like fascist and like a lot of anti-Trump images as well. His work is really fantastic. And he is literally the cleanest printer, not like in like, you know, not personal, like whatever, like I'm not talking about that at all. In that like his prints, when you look at the paper, the ink is perfect. It is perfectly smooth. It all has the same consistency. The edges are clean. Any chatter that he has is super deliberate. He's very deliberate in his process. It's very, very impressive. And I told him that too.
I'm looking at his website and some of these even look like they're almost digital because they're so clean.
And I had only seen his work digitally before I included him in Gráfica América, the show that I did. I did a print exchange and I'd always wanted to work with him. And now I'm like, haha, I have money. I can like work with anyone I want. And so I invited him. And as I'm opening up, you know, the portfolio that he sent, I just look at this work and I'm like, wow. And I think I like emailed him after I was done going through the prints and organizing everything. And I think I emailed him and I'm like, I just want to tell you, you are like the cleanest printmaker, the neatest, most precise I've ever come across in my whole life. Yeah. And I have to say, it's very rare that I've met a printmaker that wasn't also just like a good person. I've had really, really good luck. And I think because we have to collaborate so often and because we have to share and because we're doing this because we want to, you know, spread as much information as we possibly can. And so there is that sort of like commitment to the democratization of art that most printmakers are just really cool people to hang out with. So. And it's funny because once you meet like one person in printmaking, most likely, you know, a lot of the same people. So that's pretty neat too. Okay. So I've reworked this plate slightly. Let's take a quick look. Ooh. Yeah, okay. So there we go. So I reworked it. So now I have taken all of the lettering and taken away all of that, right? So that you can see the very bold, flat space. And I do think that it looks much better personally. I think it looks a lot cleaner. I like that. I would probably go in and rework the figures a little bit more also. Or maybe add like some patterns or designs in there if I was going to rework this further. But that would take a lot of reflection and thinking and analyzation of the image. So there we go. You saw this evolve and then you saw like the opposite right here with this one. I think I'm going to print this one again. So another tip, when you are printing, your plate is, I forgot. Yeah, it is easier to read. You're charging the plate. Sorry, that's the term for it. You're charging the plate as you're putting ink on it. So you're charging it. You're like giving it that sort of like ink, right? You're charging it with ink. And a lot of times when you do your first run off the block or the plate, they'll still kind of be like that sort of like it hasn't really absorbed the ink yet. So it's not as rich. And so the more you work the plate, the more, not you work the plate, but the more you print it and the more you charge it, the ink starts getting absorbed into that top layer of the plate. And this happens with wood, it happens with linoleum, it happens with everything, right? And so you get like a richer and darker color the more you do it. So I'm gonna take the block for this one and I'm gonna charge it up a little bit more. And I'm gonna see if I can kind of get rid of the foam texture that you see in sort of the larger, flatter red areas. me see if I can get rid of that. And maybe get the chatter a little bit more defined as well. So I mentioned Estampa Feminista, which is this book that I had. Oh, let's see. What kind of challenges have I encountered and overcome teaching printmaking and bringing museum education experiences to the public during shelter in place? So I've kind of learned to look at it optimistically in that I've been pushing for digital programming at my organization for years. And I did like a 2-week-long sort of fellowship at one point on doing digital programming. But you know, when you're a small nonprofit and you have limited resources, it's always like, we'll get to that later. But right now we need to focus on what our major stuff is, which for us is on-site and in-person cultural festivals. That's kind of what we're known for. We do like one of the largest, free Day of the Dead events in Southern California. Last year we had about 6,000 people come through. And so I was always told like, yeah, we want you to do digital stuff, but but right now we have to get through this challenge. And so once we were all sent home pretty abruptly, all of a sudden it was like, well, Gabby, you have been training for this for the last few years. It's time to see what we can do. So in that sense, it's been good because I've gotten to use these skills that I learned and like push myself, right? But I think the biggest challenge is the space. I mean, if you look at it, I'm working from my dining room table in my tiny 1-bedroom apartment. And then not being able to literally just walk around and see what you all are doing. And like right now, if we were doing this in person, I'd be walking around the studio or the classroom, and I would be keeping an eye on everything that you're doing. And I would just like notice the tiny little things that only I, somebody who's been doing this for like a million years, could notice, right? And then maybe make a suggestion or make a comment, or see that you're doing something really amazing and encourage you and just be like, yes, keep doing that. And we can't do this over this platform really. So I think that's been the hardest thing. But we've been lucky in that we pretty early on pivoted to digital touring for students in classrooms. And I'm telling you, those students are starving for any kind of content that isn't literally their teacher like sitting in front of the screen, just kind of talking to them. So we were really lucky to get a grant, or get a number of grants actually, to provide a lot of these tours free of charge to local Title I schools. And so we recently partnered with one of the district's leadership programs for students. And so we're like in the midst right now of doing tours for like hundreds of middle school and high school kids. And they are fantastic. And our docents also, who we were afraid would maybe desert us because they can't come on site anymore. And touring via Zoom isn't the same as touring in person, but they've really taken to all of the digital tools and platforms that we've presented. And I've done a couple of tours myself, and the energy is just so amazing. And when you're interacting with people and you're asking them to look and analyze an image and they're responding, and you can just see that light bulb go off, like it's really nice. And one thing that I didn't really think about is that we had to cancel all of our summer camp, all of our summer programming, which is when the museum is running through, or like literally like little children running through everywhere, right? And then everybody always gets sick at the end of summer camp because they're children. And so we had to cancel all of that. So we didn't have like the space overrun with like tiny children and their adorable little voices. But we did this children's Day of the Dead workshop with one of our local preschools. And we had like the cutest little kids. And I realized like I had missed like the voices of little children so much. It was just like, it made my heart sing. Nalini Yumismola summer camps. Let's see. Oh, hi, Salvador. I haven't seen you in years. Oh, that's so sweet. I'm glad you enjoyed my classes. Oh, yeah, I really miss teaching a lot.
I think the thing that's so cool about this is that it's such a tactile, textural thing. Like I keep looking at you going over this this block, this plate, and thinking that like, hey, the print is great, but I also want something that I can touch and feel. Do you ever see people kind of incorporating their actual plates into the artwork and like making something that would print backwards but is forwards actually on that material?
I have seen people use the plate. Usually they don't incorporate text when they're doing that, but I have seen a lot of artists that have started displaying their plates either next to or instead of as well. I wish I could think of who I saw doing that very recently. It doesn't come to mind, but people definitely do that. And also, I've had people ask me when they've seen my work if they could like purchase the plate, because the plates are really neat. They're really beautiful. So if you were going to be like a really well-behaved printmaker that adheres to all of the rules, because there are a lot of rules in printmaking, once you're done with a block and printed the edition, because art is a commodity in a capitalist society, you would destroy the block. So you would literally destroy it, at least like cut a big slash through it. Because in that way, if somebody came upon your block in the future, they wouldn't be able to reprint it, right? And you would make this commodity more rare within the market. So there would be less to go around. So you would literally destroy the block. But I have had people when they've seen my shows that have come to me and asked me like if they could buy the block, but I like my blocks. I hold on to them. They're stored in my tiny storage space. Hey, Rose, did you want to show us what you're working on, or do you have a question?
I was just mostly wanted to react to the idea of destroying a floor. Sounds so horrific after how long it takes to make, but I can show you what I've done so far.
Yeah.
Rose, you are a brave human to be wearing white while doing this activity.
Yeah, I just bleach it all the time. But this is an image I made of Baird Rustin.
I love it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I'm putting them, I've been wanting to do, this is it's for a community center that I'm part of in Montgomery, Alabama. And this image, like I drew this image on like a tablet like years ago, and it's like on our sign and stuff, but I've really been wanting to make something that like they could sell at the center.
Huh?
So it's like a greeting card.
So you did that using the foam?
I used, I had already actually, before I heard about this class, I had bought like some basic printing material. So it's rubber, it's like a rubber.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is what I cut into.
Yeah, so that's like an easy cut. So that's like a easier to kind of cut into. Because I was going to ask you if it was foam. I really wanted I wanted to know how you got that texture in the background. Because I'm like, oh, how did you,
Yeah, no, I tried, but I tried to do the like I colored in here, I have it somewhere. I did it the way that you showed that you do it with foam, right? With a pencil and like carving it in, and then it wasn't. I was like, this is not gonna print because I don't think it was deep enough. So I just went over it. So I like drew all this on there. Tried to get it in there, and then I took this off and I went over it again with a carving tool.
Nice. Well, if you ever have like any spare time on your hands and you wanted to do a comparison between the easy cut and the foam, I mean, that might be something fun.
Yes, I would love to do that.
So somebody's asking if there are thicker foam blocks available for purchase. I haven't seen any that are a lot thicker, to be honest with you. I know that there's foam. I have seen foam that is particularly for creating like stencils that you're supposed to carve out and then stick on something else and then roll it out that way. But with that, you're not really pressing into it. What you're doing is that you're literally like cutting it out, and then like the nice foaminess absorbs the ink. So that's what I've seen with that. Is it because, is it for like aesthetic purposes, or is it that maybe you feel like the process would be a little bit easier if you had a thicker foam? Because I know some printmakers don't like to work with really thin linoleum, and they'll usually mount it on like a block of wood or something.
Mm.
Okay. Let's see how this is coming along. Yeah, so you can tell that I've charged my plate. So the foam is starting to really absorb that ink. So I don't know if you can tell the difference between them by looking at them. But the bottom one is the second print that I did. And you can see that the color is a little richer and a little deeper because I have charged it as opposed to the first one, right? So we have those two there.
We've got a question from David, who says, one of my letters is unfortunately the wrong way. Is there any way to correct it without starting over?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. And I have a print that actually I sold out of because it had an image of Frida in it, and people love Frida. So like Frida was one of the characters in this print that I did. And one of the letter J, it's like the hardest one because I did it. It said like, it was like a Trinity, whatever sort of situation, kind of playing on Catholic imagery. And I had written out Hija, which is daughter, right? And I had written H-I-J-A, and my J was backwards, and there was nothing I could do about it. And I still sold out of those prints. I don't know, like people couldn't tell, or they...
At that point, you just play it off like a deliberate choice. It's artistic license. You're making a commentary on the rules of language and society.
I mean, I guess one way to solve it would be if you have space anywhere else on your plate that you can still kind of play with, would be to then recess that whole area if you wanted to. And then move the text to a different area and kind of like work it into another space on the block or the plate. The other solution, and this is like just a pain if you wanted to do this, the other solution would be to like kind of like cut out that area and then go in later also with like a stamp situation if you wanted to. But I feel like if you just have one letter that's backwards, you know, we as humans, our brain kind of fills things in for us and corrects things inside. I don't think people will notice. Or if they, you know, and it might be like years, like they might have it forever, and then one day they're like, hey, I just noticed that that letter is backwards. So if it's one, I don't think it should be a big deal. So I am done, I think, printing or doing the demo. I could go back and do something if you have any questions about it, but I'm pretty satisfied right now with what I have so far. But I can talk about signing and numbering and editioning prints.
I think that would be great. I also just wanted to let folks know, you know, we've got about like 10 minutes left of our time here. So if you would like, if you have made a print tonight, I think it would be fantastic if you are brave enough to show it up. We could, you know, take a screenshot of everybody's prints if you wanted to show it off, or you could get some feedback from Gabriela. I want to give everyone this opportunity to do so before we part for the evening.
Wow, time went by so fast.
I know. You're a very engaging instructor.
I was like, how am I going to fill an hour and a half of content?
Oh, look at that.
Oh, I like both of them.
All right. Here, let me hold those up. Just keep holding those up real quick when I'm taking a screenshot here. Trying at least. Oh, no. Wrong mode. There we go. Okay. Perfect. I got one. Thank you.
Those are both really beautiful. And they're so different, right? Like the mood itself is so different.
Yeah, thank you so much for the workshop. It was really fun.
Yeah. Let's see. Somebody asked if you can see my art online. I have a really outdated website that I haven't updated in probably 10 years. It has a lot of my old artwork. And I haven't had the time because I work in a museum and I work like 1 million hours a week. So I haven't had time to update it, but yeah, there it is. My very, very old website. You can see some of my older work on there. I'm currently in the middle. I've been in the middle of working on a new series of works that are more mixed media. I can actually probably grab something. I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab a pencil. I'm gonna grab a couple of show and tell things. And in the meantime, if you wanna share, we can do that. I'll be right back.
Yeah, Rose, if you wanted to come back up on the screen to do a screenshot, if you'd like to, I think that would be great. I think people would love to see Bayard Rustin again as well.
Okay.
All right, give me one moment.
Let me find my best one.
All right, there we go. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, if we don't have our prints from the workshop ready to show, where should we send them? I will put my email in here. So I'm putting it in the chat right now, but it's lee@glbthistory.org. And I will share them with our social media team. And hopefully we'll be able to do a little collage, little gallery showing off everyone's wonderful work.
So storing these and letting these dry, right? They're not going to necessarily dry immediately. So my advice is for your prints to layer them. So take a piece of newsprint, put the print over it, and then layer it with a piece of newsprint. So if you don't have space, if you have like a gigantic table where you can lay these out and it's not going to interrupt, you know, your day, then by all means lay them on flat. But I would do a print, a layer of newsprint, a print, a layer of newsprint, a print, a layer of newsprint, and don't put any pressure on them, because in some cases, if the ink is even a little bit tacky, it'll stick to the paper itself. So the cool thing about printmaking is that because you can make multiples, you can literally make your best friend's wedding invitation for them if you wanted to. So I've done like a lot of like announcements and invitations, and this is a piece of linoleum here. So this is a Battleship gray linoleum piece. I have some gold linoleum. So here's kind of like, oh, we have some prints. Never be silent in the face of, I can't read the last word. Injustice, yay, I love it.
That's fantastic, David. I really like the blue.
Yeah, the blue is nice. It's a good shade of blue. The first one I didn't put enough ink, and it came out like super ghosty ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Like unreadable.
Let's see. Hey, Win, would you be down to put yourself up on the screen once more and we can get a nice gallery view of everyone with their prints? Wonderful. All right. Here, Gabby, you put yours up too.
Oh, okay.
All right. So here, I'm going to stop the top down real quick. There we go. Perfect. All right. Everyone ready? Beautiful. Oh, they're so pretty. So beautiful. All right. Let's see. All right, let's do one more. My computer just decided to freeze as I was doing that. I'm so sorry. I thought I got it. All right. Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Wonderful. And if anybody has any social media handles that you'd like to be tagged in, let us know. We'd be happy to share you. And it looks like Salvador is asking, where can we take more workshops from you? I know a ton more folks would love to learn from you.
Oh, that would be so nice. So I would love to. I don't know. I would like to do a relief one at some point. So maybe that's a conversation that I can have with you, Lee, about maybe doing a relief one in the future. Maybe it could be, yeah, maybe it could be, it would have to be though, unfortunately with relief printmaking, it might have to be multiple sessions. So it might have to be like over 2 weeks or maybe over a month, but like 2. Yeah, but I'd be happy to do it. I'm safer at home, so.
I think that would be really neat to do. I think we would love to start, some series and some more art making interactive programming. Thank you everyone for participating tonight, wherever you are. And I'm hoping that we get to do more things like this in the future. In the last year, we've really been trying to incorporate some interactive art making into our programming. So if there's any sort of type of events that you'd like to see or that you'd like to participate in, feel free to, send us messages on social media or send in emails with ideas. We're always interested in hearing feedback and proposals from folks in the community. So great.
Thank you, everyone. It was so nice and generous of you to join us and to show us all the artwork that you're making. Yeah, and to just meet all of you virtually.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Gabriela, for guiding all of us in this process and lending your expertise. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful weekend and safe holidays. Wear your masks, do holiday things safely with folks in your immediate houses, and do lovely, wonderful things over Zoom like we've been doing tonight. So there's endless possibilities to have everyone do safe holiday joy. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you in the future.